What was the inequality of the Unequal Treaties? The Unequal Treaties were a series of engagements made between the Asian country of China and the Western countries, most notably the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, the USA and Russia during the 19th and early 20th centuries. These treaties were often signed following a military defeat suffered by the Asian nation or following military threats made by the Western nation or nations. The terms specified obligations to be borne exclusively by the Asian nation and included provisions such as the cession of territory, payment of reparations, the opening of treaty ports, the relinquishment of the right to control tariffs and imports, in addition to granting the extraterritoriality to foreign citizens. The term unequal treaty became associated with the concept of China's century of humiliation, especially the concessions to foreign powers and the loss of tariff autonomy through the treaty ports. The first use of the term unequal treaties in China. In China, the term unequal treaties was first used in the early 1920s to describe the historical treaties that were imposed on the nation from the 1840s until that time and was popularized by Sun Yat-sen. According to the American historian Dong Wang, the phrase unequal treaties had long been widely used but lacked a clear and unambiguous meaning, as there was no agreement about the actual number of treaties signed between China and foreign countries that should be counted as unequal. In opposition to that, however, is the view from Chinese historical scholars that the phrase has typically been used to refer to the many cases in which China was forced to pay large amounts in financial reparations, open up its ports for trade, cede or lease territories such as Manchuria, border areas to the Russian Empire, Hong Kong to the British Empire, Guangzhou to France, Taiwan to the Japanese Empire, Jiaozhou Bay to the German Empire, and concession territories such as Tianjin, Hankou and Shanghai following military threats. Further to that viewpoint is the opinion of Chinese-American sinologist Emmanuel Zhu, who stated that the Chinese viewed the treaties as unequal because they were not negotiated by nations treating each other as equals, merely imposed upon China after a war that had encroached upon the sovereign rights of China, which reduced the nation to the status of being viewed as semi-colonial in the eyes of Western nations. While the 1842 Treaty of Nanjing between the Qing dynasty and Great Britain to end the First Opium War was the first to be considered unequal, the Convention of Quenpa negotiations in 1841 were also later referred to as being unequal. Following the First Opium War, treaties enabled 5 Chinese ports to open to foreign trade, while also allowing, at least in theory, foreign missionaries to reside within China. Foreign residents in the port cities were protected by the laws of their own country and not governed by Chinese rules and regulations under Chinese law, a term deemed as extraterritoriality. Under the treaties, the UK established the British Supreme Court for China and Japan, while the US had the United States Court for China in Shanghai. The unequal treaties gave European powers jurisdiction over missions in China, even some authority over Chinese Christians. Chinese post-World War I resentment. After the conclusion of the First World War in 1918, China's patriotic consciousness began to focus on the treaties, which by that time had become known as the unequal treaties. Germany was forced to terminate its rights. Russia, gripped in its own revolution, surrendered theirs, while the United States organized the Washington Conference to negotiate those treaties. A new national government was announced by Chiang Kai-shek in 1927, with the Western powers offering diplomatic recognition, which aroused anxiety in Japan. The new Chinese government announced that the great powers had exploited China for decades over unequal treaties, and the time for such treaties was over, demanding they all be renegotiated on equal terms. Towards the end of the unequal treaties, after the Boxer Rebellion and the signing of the Anglo-Japanese Alliance of 1902, Germany began to reassess its policy towards China. In fact, in 1907, Germany suggested the trilateral German-Chinese-American agreement, one that did not come to fruition. China entered a new era of ending the unequal treaties on March 14, 1917, when it broke off diplomatic relations with Germany, a move that terminated the concessions it had given to that nation. China then declared war on Germany on August 17, 1917. The Unequal Treaty of 1861 was thus voided, which reinstated Chinese control of the concessions of Tianjin and Hankou. In 1919, the post-war peace negotiations failed to return the territories in Shandong province, previously under German control, back to China after it was determined Japan had occupied those territories since 1914 and was permitted to retain those territories under the Treaty of Versailles. The Chinese delegate, Wellington Koo, refused to sign the peace agreement, the only conference member to boycott the signing ceremony. The failure of handing back Shandong to China was seen as an act of betrayal by other conference members after China's wartime contributions. The domestic backlash that followed would eventually cause the collapse of the cabinet of the Duan Chiroi government and lead to the May the 4th movement. On the 20th of May 1921, China secured, in accordance with the German-Chinese Peace Treaty, a diplomatic accord which was considered the first equal treaty between China and a European nation. During the Nanjing period, the Republic of China, as it was then known, unsuccessfully sought to negotiate an end to unequal treaties. However, many of the treaties China considered as being unequal were eventually repealed during the Second Sino-Japanese War, which took place from 1937 until 1945. After the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, China became an ally of the United Kingdom and the United States. Treaties were then signed between the three nations to end the British and American extraterritoriality in January 1943. Furthermore, there were significant examples that outlasted the Second World War. In particular, Hong Kong remained a British territory until it was handed over to China in 1997. That brings us to the end of this video, highlighting a historical era that has helped shape China today. If you've enjoyed watching and it's shown you a little detail of life and events here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.